I decided to buy another condo. Absolutely wrong. This is the biggest lesson I learned in the 12 years of living in Vietnam. I started looking at a property, going through all those horrible listings. It was catfishing all over again. Don't treat it like an American. How does a foreigner buy real estate in Vietnam? That was so difficult. How I bought the property first as a foreigner and now as a local. But why is it so expensive? Your investments don't make sense. Everything I unpacked, you can technically do it on your own. What about the local rates for mortgages for somebody who is a local versus a foreigner? If you think crossing the streets in Saigon is dangerous, try crossing paths with a Vietnamese condo listing. At least the scooters honk before they clip your kneecaps. Fake listings smile, take your deposits, and vanish faster than a bun sale on a tourist's plate. Today, I'll walk you through my experience and the exact moves that I took to buy real estate in Vietnam, first as an American and then as a Vietnamese citizen. If you've ever wondered what it takes to buy real estate in a place that does not play by the playbook, this video is for you. I will show you a step-by-step process of how I deciphered the market, dodge fake agents, crack the 30% foreign quota, and turn the 50-year lease into real permanent bricks. So let's get started. I have called Vietnam home for the last 12 years. And during this time, I've seen prices of homes skyrocket and climb, just like a bamboo, straight up and fast. Continue to rent meant that I am underwriting the landlord's retirement, while the dong quietly strengthens against the dollar. At that time, I was on my lawyer visa, as I stated in a previous video. So if you want to know how I ended up in Vietnam, you can click and watch that video. So with my 5-year visa, I did not rush. I dissected every single district, mapped out the price range data, and waited for the right time to enter the market. Buying was not the sentiment. It was a strategic hedge against currency risk, cap on the living costs, and public vote of confidence in the market that I continue to advise for people to enter. For those who do not know me, my name is Ken Yoon, international and business immigration attorney with over 16 years of experience helping individuals, companies to live, work, invest, and buy real estate in Vietnam. So the second question I got was, how did you find your first listing? So I started looking at the listings as an American. Absolutely wrong. Because in America, I would go on Zillow or Trulia or on other sites that would let me look at the property, what year it was built, the price, walkability score, and other factors, and give you estimates or comparables. But here, it is a minefield because some of the listings are outdated, not even relevant, and they don't even have any pictures for you to look at. So this was way back in the 2010s. But looking through this listing and finding a match was like Tinder. Each one was a catfish, because I actually went to go look at them and they did not look anything like it. So when I was looking through the different listings of a 3-bedroom, yes, it had 3 bedrooms, but 2 bedrooms was the room to sleep in, and one of them was actually the living room. So you can't count that as a bedroom. Or a 2-bedroom, whereas 1 room and 1 living room. And then a studio is just this small little box that was so difficult. So really, it was catfishing all over again. So one time I went to look at this one property and it said it was $160,000. It looked pretty decent for a 2-bedroom in a certain area. Then when I got there and I actually talked to the agent, I went to go look at it and I said, so how much is it? And they said it was $210,000. That was about 50% above the price, which was out of my price range at that time. So therefore, learning about ways to look at the listing, don't treat it like an American. Make sure that you look at the way in Vietnam, and that I will get to later. So I went to look at a bunch of different sites as well, such as BacDongSang.com or Propsy or River or one of these other ones. And really, it's the same thing. They just recycle old fluff. Right now, Vietnam doesn't have a centralized MLS system. So therefore, you're looking at the same listing and they're all outdated. So those are things that need to improve. And now they've gotten much better. Nevertheless, it's still a big minefield out there when you're trying to find a condo, let alone a house or land. So without Zillow, what did I use in order to value the property? So in order to really evaluate back in the 2010s on what properties that you understand the pricing, you have to kind of build your own compass, which allows you to understand the pricing, the geographical area, what sold in those other areas, and also looking at different agents and working with them as well to understand the valuation of a property. So what I did was I created a Google Excel sheet with the price ranges, with the square meters or how large the property is, what project it was in, also compared it with the other agents in order to get a range of prices. And my range was anywhere plus or minus 30%. So if I went into a situation where the agent was giving me a price range above 30%, then I will actually cut that out right away because they're not giving the real price, or they're actually looking for higher commission and making more money off of the deal instead of really helping my interest, which is buying for me. So that's another thing I learned as well, is regarding agency. Agent who takes you to a place to look at don't know if they are the seller agent or the buyer agent. That was really hard to decipher as well. So you probably want to know, how does a foreigner buy real estate in Vietnam? The biggest question is regarding the foreign quota. At the time that I was buying back then, the foreign quota was not established, or it was harder to know. I started looking at a property, going through all those horrible listings, finally identified a place that I liked with the right bedroom to the right square meters and right price. And then we were about to make an offer. The agent made an offer. It was a developer project. And the developer said, no, we have hit the 30% foreign quota. You cannot buy here. After all that hard work, almost 3 months, and looking and waiting, so almost 6 months to find a property I liked, to know that it was hit the foreign quota. Not all buildings are permitted to sell to foreigners. They have to get approved for sale to foreigners. And then the 30% quota. So you definitely want to ask first, can they sell to foreigners? And then two, how much of the 30% quota for this project is already used up, and also about the city or the province as well, to make sure that you can buy what you want. So now that you have the property, you need to know what type of property it is. What is the difference between a 50-year lease versus a freehold or real ownership of the property? So as a foreigner, you only have a 50-year leasehold, whereas in a local Vietnamese, you can have what's called in perpetuity or freehold of the property for as long as you live, and you can pass it on. So looking at and understanding, as a foreigner buying into an apartment, buying into a condo or other property, then you're only subjected to a 50-year lease with a 1-year renewal, which in essence is a 99-year lease, and all those rights and also those restrictions. So the biggest difference between the 50-year lease versus the freehold is the ability to sell the property and what the valuation is. So if you have a 50-year lease, every year your property is diminishing in value because your lease is shorter and shorter. Whereas in perpetuity, the values continue to go up as you continue to hold the property, and there's no set limit of when you have to renew. That is one of the big difference. So selling as a foreign quota to another foreigner only versus selling or buying a property that is locally owned in freehold, where you can sell it on to another local Vietnamese in the future, or even to a foreigner, but then of course they will be under a leasehold and not a freehold. That was the quota cliff that most foreigners would not see until the contract is burning. But let's go back to a reality check. 80% of you are not subscribed to our channel at this time. Subscribing costs nothing, but missing the next trap could cost you 6 figures. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and stay 2 steps ahead. All right, let us open up the ledger and see all the hidden costs that makes a bargain condo Western level prices. So I'm gonna break down every single cost at closing, including the taxes, the closing fees, and other government fees as well. So if you look at a total transaction of purchasing a property, you're looking at roughly about 2% registration fee, 2% of the maintenance fund-up fee, and then as a foreigner buying and selling, you gotta add up another 5% for the foreigner tax. And then of course, any arrears on the HOA or homeowner's insurance as well. So for example, if you're buying a property for $200,000, then you're looking at between $4,000 to $6,000 will be your taxes, registration, and all the fees that will be associated at closing. If you look around all the different properties and the different price ranges, why is District 1 looking at $15,000 per square meter? And some places like the JW Marriott by Masterise is going up to $20,000 or $500 million per square meter. So you're looking at just a 50 square meter home is already $750,000. That sounds like a crazy number. If you go into the suburbs, you're probably looking at a third of that, probably about 5,000 to 8,000 per square meter. And then if you look into the countryside, it becomes a lot more realistic. You're looking between $2,500 to $5,000 per square meter. So that's what you're looking at when you're buying real estate in Ho Chi Minh City. If you're coming out to the suburbs like Long An, Bình Nhieu, Duong, Nong Nai, you're getting a little bit better. And if you're willing to live in the countryside or the smaller cities like Vũng Tàu or even Cà Mau or even maybe Hải Phòng or Vĩnh Long, you will have a lot more options as well. But why is it so expensive, you ask? So the real answer is land scarcity. Vietnam would appear to be pretty big, but in reality, it's actually very, very tiny. It's pretty much a geographical footprint of a place 1/3 of the size of California. With that said, land is still scarce. It's still the most appreciating asset in Vietnam. So if you can buy land and build a house, that would be your greatest asset. If you can't, you can buy a condo that looks like it will appreciate as well. But even at that, if you looked at the prices already, how do you know the agents are not fluffing? How do you know all those marketing videos and ads are not fluffing or appreciating their prices? What we highly recommend is you get a valuation. So modern times is much better. I've done much better than what I used to buy properties 10 years ago. Now, every time I look at a property, I would do a valuation of the property based on one of the big companies. I mean, we use Avison Young, we use Saville, CBRE to do a valuation of the property so you can get a price range of how much it is. So fast forward roughly about 10 years after I got my Vietnamese citizenship, what changed overnight in regards to my real estate purchases? So after that, I was able to purchase as well. I didn't buy land yet. I decided to buy another condo. So the great thing was no restrictions on foreign quota, less paperwork that I had to go through. Transfer fees were much less, as we talked about. And of course, I can actually buy from anybody I want, not restricted to foreigners. Locals were much more open to sell to you because they didn't have to go through all those taxes, fees, and transfers with a foreigner and looking at the quota as well. So the buying process of the condo was so much easier as a local than it was as a foreigner. Then the question is, what about the local rates for mortgages for somebody who is a local versus a foreigner? So as you know, foreigners cannot get a loan in Vietnam, regardless of how much money you make, how many assets you have. As a foreigner, you cannot be banked or lent to on a long-term mortgage. But as a local, and at that time, I already been in Vietnam for about 5 to 7 years. I have a company, I have a salary, so I was able to get a mortgage as well. So it's great, very similar to the United States. You do a 30 to 35% deposit, and then you can get a loan on the rest. So I decided to, at the time, to go a shorter amount. I only did 20 years instead of 30 years typical in the United States, only because Vietnam is an adjustable rate mortgage, not a fixed rate mortgage. So in the first 2 years, it's actually 0% interest. But then after that, now it was just really adjustable. So the ranges when we first started, I didn't have amazing credit yet because I've only had been in Vietnam for a few years. I was able to get 8%, which if you go judge it on the US standards, that's actually very high, considering there are times that the US mortgage rate was only 3 to 3.25%. But then in Vietnam, as a foreigner, that was still pretty good. When I became Vietnamese citizen, I can get a loan 20 years at 7% with variable. And now looking back, sometimes it went up to 10%, sometimes it stayed at 9%. So a range between 7 to 10% for 20 years is not too bad for a foreigner who became a Vietnamese citizen. So that's how I bought as a Vietnamese as opposed to a foreigner. It's still so much better in your buying options, in your ability to get loans, and also if I needed to pass on the property, collateralize, or use it for other purposes as well. Well, now that you've heard about how I bought the property first as a foreigner and now as a local, I want to share with you a little bit about the 10-year trajectory from the first time I bought, roughly about 2013 to roughly about 2023, 24. So if you look at the time period when I first moved to Vietnam, about 2012, you look at the time where people were investing a lot into Vietnam, it was growing. There were many opportunities. You had the global brands and also the strong local brands like Vingroup was coming up, Novaland, Hoàng Anh Gia Lai, Thanh Thanh Công, and many of other real estate companies were really growing. FLC, Vang Thanh Phác. So therefore, the real estate market really in the 10 years kept on going up and up and up, all the way to the point that we're talking about $20,000 per square meter over at JW Marriott. Now you even look at Empire or Metropole, they're at 160 to 170 million. So you're looking at $7,000 to $8,000 as well per square meter. So that's going up there with the metropolitan cities of the world like San Francisco, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and many other cities. So that was going on the entire time I was here, all the way through COVID. Funny enough, even during COVID, 2019 to 2022, the housing prices were actually kept steady. It didn't drop that much if you look at the trend. But once the Vang Tân Phak or the Trương My Lang scandal hit in 2022, everything went haywire due to the fact that banks were not able to hold on to the loans anymore. People could not pay and they were being foreclosed. And then the banks were not lending to anybody else, regardless of your track record or your history. And then, of course, that imploded for many of the developers who couldn't get money to develop. So the entire real estate industry had hinged on this really big real estate scandal by Ms. Trương My Lang, and it trickled down to everybody all the way to the consumers. So for a period of 2 years, from 2022 to 2024, people were having a tough time, and now they're starting to drop the prices a little bit just because you can't hold on to your mortgage anymore. If you were a speculator, your investments don't make sense, which presents a really great time for folks to come in at this current time, put your money down, transfer your money, and get into a property that you would like, either a condo you want to live in, a beach house or condo, or land that you want to invest for the future, or even a shop house if you want to do business and live as well. So right now is a very good time. From the first time I bought until the time I bought recently, I'm probably gonna buy some more properties as well. So those are things I wanted to share with you personally about my own experience. Hopefully it will help you. But collectively, we know a lot of strategies and ways to help you buy real estate here in Vietnam. So now that you have a property, you may have 1, 2, or 3, you want to talk about inheritance and wills and how you pass it on. So we're seeing a lot of it now where first generation Vietnamese who came back did well, have properties and assets, and now they need to transfer it to their children. So you might be in that situation as well. Inheriting a property in Vietnam that you may or may not be able to be on title. If you do not have your national ID or your Vietnamese passport, then you probably can't be entitled to the property. So if you qualify, definitely watch some of our videos. You can click on the right hand corner for all the playlists on how to get your ID and also your passport. But it is very important that you have your will in place, your inheritance strategy, and also understanding the tax structure in Vietnam as well. So if you need any help with drafting your will, understanding the taxes, and also to enforce your inheritance rights, our team of experts will be happy to help you. Especially important that you draft your will as a bilingual will. Vietnamese will be an enforceable language because the estate planning laws here in Vietnam are based on Vietnamese laws and Vietnamese courts. However, you may have assets abroad or you may only speak English. So our team can help you with bilingual wills that are legally enforceable in Vietnam, but also to assist you in your home country as well, especially if you're from the United States, because I'm an American licensed attorney and wills and trusts are based on federal law. Everything I unpacked, you can technically do it on your own, but it is a maze. If you want to skip the guess and stress, our law firm has a turnkey program that does 2 things. We do a full service due diligence on the real estate, including identifying whether the developer has a good track record, the bank is going to lend and their lending processes. We review all the purchase and sale agreements, the transfer process, help you in understanding the taxes, the transfer process, and how to get the property in your name. Also, we help you with the money transfer and the escrow services so that you know your deposits and your money is transferring to the right place. So it's a really one-stop shop to help you buy real estate in Vietnam. For folks of Vietnamese descent, we can take you even a step further and see if you qualify for the Vietnamese citizenship. This will unlock the 50-year lease and give you access to landed property and land as freehold. With those safeguards in mind, this is the biggest lesson I learned in the 12 years of living in Vietnam, is that in real estate, precision overcomes luck. We turn high rents into hard equity by looking at every fee, every clause, and every listing as if it's money on the table, and you can do the same. If this no-nonsense saved you a headache, then hit the subscribe button, share this video with someone eyeing the Vietnam market, and look at the description for our direct contact. This is only my personal experience about buying in Vietnam. It's not the universal legal advice. So I also recommend you get your own independent counsel. But if you decide you want to use our service, we'll be happy to help you. So on behalf of Duong Global, my name is Ken Duong. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you on the next one.
Come on.